Everyone's missing. Everyone's missing. Everyone's missing. But I'm still here. The song that I missed you. They tried to replace you. Wires for tissue. But my vision's clear.
Today on the Changeville podcast, we're talking to Tunde Olaniran. Tunde has been a strong proponent of LGBT rights and equality in his hometown of Flint, Michigan, working to end housing discrimination issues. He creates positive emotional support for isolated individuals through his unique take on R&B, which is often referred to as Afro-futurist. We're honored to have Tunde on the show today. How are you doing today, Tunde?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little sleepy. I was up for like 22 hours yesterday.
Oh.
It was really kind of a lot, but doing okay.
Has gigging got you tired, touring and everything?
No, well, I was in the studio all day, and then I drove down to another city in Michigan to sit in on someone's session for their record release. A guy named Chris Backgate. He's a folk country artist from Michigan.
Oh, cool.
So just a lot of driving and then just being awake super early. I just didn't get home until later, but yeah.
Is it a possible collaboration going on there, or are you guys just kind of friends, so you're stopping by the studio to just kind of look at the process?
Well, he released a record, and I co-wrote a song with him for his record. So at his album release last night, we did the song. Earlier, I was just working on my own music, in Detroit. So.
Okay, cool. Well, one thing that I wanted to go ahead and, I guess, start discussion today with would be some of your work in your hometown of Flint, and just sort of, I guess, how the acoustic version of your song "Everyone's Missing" kind of came about, and that initial project kind of a while back.
I got approached by the Flint Public Library to do a concert, essentially, and I decided I had been working with a woman named Adrienne Marie Brown on a science fiction short story that I was writing for this anthology she was creating. And I had been thinking about visionary fiction, science fiction, and we decided to do a workshop like a month before my concert, with just open it up to people in Flint. And I think I talked about that a little bit at the TED Talk. So we had that workshop, and it just turned into this really interesting discussion because it was people basically writing like really short science fiction stories and pairing up with someone that they hadn't really maybe met before. So that was cool, and like all these different concepts came up and all these ideas, and one concept was people leaving the city of Flint for various reasons, and just that idea kind of stuck with me, and I ended up writing a song with a group of people who were part of the live performance at the library. So there was like a cellist and a guitar player and just some other instrumentalists from Flint and Detroit. And Everyone's Missing was the song that we wrote. And I ended up actually using it and recording it and producing it on my album Transgressor. But since it started out as an acoustic song, I think maybe that's, for whatever reason, I ended up kind of doing it in a lot of different incarnations with different, musicians and instrumentalists at like TED Talk or at my listening party. I did it with a beatboxer and a guitarist, and did it with a harpist, Aya Simone, at the for the TED Talk. And it just kind of is one of those songs that I enjoy doing acoustically because that's how it was written.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like different versions of it, like you said. Or when I looked it up online, you can find you playing with sort of a full backing band, and then the harp was gorgeous. That was a really unique performance, I thought. So yeah, that's really cool. I didn't realize that was a song that you had written with those other artists. I thought that might have been like a version of your song, but that was actually you produced it later for the album.
Yeah, so if you listen to the version of the Flint Public Library, that was the first version of the song.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What was the process like of taking something that was sort of raw and acoustic like that and bringing it into the style of that album of Transgressor?
I feel like it wasn't that challenging because I'd written, the melody, and so like every other song on Transgressor, I kind of written a melody for a lot of the stuff, and then kind of built everything around, like lyrically around like an initial melodic idea. So I think the process was pretty similar. It just helped that I already kind of knew some chords that I would use in the version that I produced. But I kind of approach a lot of songs similarly. Like I actually, not that I write them fully acoustically, but when it comes to like the hook, I try to think about how it would sound as like a country song in a way. Huh. And I feel like that usually gets you to a more interesting place, like melodically, lyrically, emotionally. So like Namesake, that the chorus, and everybody's hoping they're scraping, like all that. Like I was like, what would this be like as a country song? So that usually is like my method. But with Everyone's Missing, oftentimes when I'm producing, I will have like really fun sounds that I know I want to use too. So like, I have this great sample and I've been waiting to use it, so maybe we can use this like kalimba or this bell to be the dun 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 dun, that plays in Everyone's Missing on the album.
Yeah.
So like it usually it's a mix of things when it comes to putting a song together, but that really helped because I already knew the chord progression.
Well, that's really interesting. So when you mean like as a country song, sort of just that storytelling, more broken down, Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash take on just acoustic guitar and singing. That way, the chorus or the hook stays as something that's emotional and catchy.
Yeah, I think that I'm very visual in terms of like I envision a lot of things, and it helps me make the decision creatively. So like I literally am like, okay, if I was like sitting in on like an acoustic session at like in like a Nashville bar and we were singing this song, like would it feel like would I be happy? Like, oh yeah, I'm glad I wrote this. This is good. This is working. But yeah, I think that Patsy Cline, Dolly Parton, I think country and folk have a lot of really great, like has a really rich tradition. I mean, country music is very poppy, just like every other genre now. But I think it's very, although the lyrics aren't always that great, like in contemporary country, I think that they do try to focus on very like imagery driven, things that are very catchy and things that are kind of easy to sing along to. And I'm not saying that everything I do is easy to sing along to, but I try to put something in every song that like, you're ready to sing along to that part, and you can sing along to it. Like when we've had the sound go out at a concert, we've been able to get people to sing along, even if they barely knew the song. There's a part of that, in every track.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily like I think sometimes pop music gets like a bad rap because people say, you're just aiming to make something catchy. But in a way, aiming to make something catchy is emotional because you can get so many people to sing along to something that they're just now hearing. So I guess, when you're saying with country, common themes and choruses, whether it's, blue jeans or beer or whatever, but like, if you pick a common theme that your audience will understand, I guess it makes it easier to sort of get everyone to sing along. And this is funny now I'm picturing honky-tonk versions of your songs.
Cool. Yeah, maybe one day. My manager is based in Nashville. You probably connected with her, so maybe one day. No, I think that like, pop music is a little different than country in that I think they're going for catchy and repetitive, and the imagery part, if the person's a good writer, it might happen to have a lot of good imagery, but I don't think it's always necessary in pop music for the imagery to be as vibrant and as in like other genres. I don't think it's just country, but I don't know if pop is always like as rich with imagery as much as they want to be like, na 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 na, whoa! Like you want to have like something like that even like is enough for like some pop songs to just like, yeah, we're ready to sing that part. So
as far as your style goes, which is obviously a blend of a lot of different things, I've read that you kind of talk about how you listen to a lot of different music. I mean, you consider folk and country when you're writing your hooks and you listen to a lot of rock music. But what ends up coming out after the production of it is something. Now, did you coin the phrase or the term? Sorry, Afro-futurist. And for people who are kind of unfamiliar with it, could you talk a little bit about that?
Did I coin the phrase Afrofuturism?
Yeah.
No. Afrofuturism is like a much older concept that originated in the 70s. I think that for me, Afrofuturism has kind of mutated and has like really broadened in its definition. But a lot of it comes from like, all right, what are the futures that people in the African diaspora envision and create? How does the spirituality and traditions of Africa, like, how do they travel through time? What do they look like now? And how will they look in the future? And I think that really it can be as simple as what are Black people envisioning? Because that, I think, would definitely be different. If you look at even, like, science fiction, film as a genre, as one like aspect of science fiction, perspectives are very important, and I think you very often feel like a white male perspective of the future, whether it's this topic or not. It's often like a lone person, like who's chosen to be the savior, who breaks the rules, who's fighting against patriarchy, which is so interesting because in the white imagination, they're often fighting against this, like, colonial nationalist thing, which, like, Europe created. You know what I mean? It's, like, weird. Like, it's like, oh, okay, so we, like, it's just interesting. But, like, if you look at someone like Octavia Butler, the characters are often women of color. And not that they aren't necessarily singular characters, but the themes are a lot more about, like, cooperation, how relationships and intimacy can affect, like, survival, being adaptable. So there's just, like, all these interesting things that come up when you look at visions of the future from a Black perspective. So I feel like, it affects how I, the costumes I create, the things I wear on stage. It affects the music I make. And I think that, like, for some people, Afrofuturism can still be even more specific and deal with, like, colonizing or, like, can deal with, for sure, like, technologies in the future. But for me, I think it's a much broader term of Black visions of the future,
Right. So your music is Afrofuturist in the sense that it reflects a Black perspective of the future, but in sort of a positive view of the future, like you were saying, of cooperation and of learning to work together in that sense.
Yeah, and I don't think it necessarily is like has to be that neat and tidy. It's just like thinking about even me being the future. Like, I wrote a song about, like, seeing my ancestors and like them doing things in a way that they had no idea that, like, what the future would be, and, like, maybe couldn't even imagine something beyond, like, colonialism or beyond slavery. And, like, me being here now is, like, this very radical, it will be a very radical vision of the future, in the 18th and 19th century.
Right.
So, like, just existing in a certain way, I think, embodies the idea of a bold, radical Black futures,
Right. And I think in that way, you are definitely able to use your music and your art to sort of spread or just convey, like, a level of social awareness. I was wondering what you think the artist's role is in sort of creating more of a social awareness in their community, and how does that kind of apply to the way you approach your songwriting and your work?
I think it can vary from artist to artist, and it really depends on what kind of education you have, whether formal or informal, kind of where you place yourself in history and your perspective in that. and how connected you feel to your community and what you care about. Because I think a lot of times there is a very strong narrative from artists to, like, do your thing, get out, be successful, be an example that way. Or some artists are very explicit and, like, their music is very literally all about their organizing work, and, like, everything is about that. And, you know, it's really a way to, like, be a tool of propaganda, not in a bad way, but to be a propaganda for your movement building. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you see artists like that. I feel like I kind of am a mix in some ways. Like, I really am just trying to be happy and do things that make me happy. Like, I worked at Planned Parenthood for a really long time. It was kind of the first job I ever had, and kind of grew up there. And so I had this very, like, nonprofit corporate vibe, and it was like I wasn't happy. And so I, like, withdrew from a lot of organizing work because I felt like it was, like, draining me as well as the job, and, like, left my job even last year to be a full-time artist. And so, like, a lot of what I'm doing is, like, I just want to, you know, do something that makes me feel happy, and I think that it's working to help other people feel, like, bolder in the work that they do. Like, I'll get messages from people who are like, you know, your music had this, like, super profound effect on me, and it's, like, it led me to make all of these really radical decisions in my own life and choices. But then I can also say, all right, well, if I have control over a bill, like a lineup, I want women of color on that, you know, bill at all times. And I'll talk to my audience about, like, if you go to a show and there aren't any women on the bill, it should be strange to you. It shouldn't be okay or, like, normal. And, like, that might be a small thing, but for me it's a way to advocate for a vision of a future that I would like, where more women and women of color are in places of control and power in all aspects of the music, quote-unquote, industry. Like, that to me is, like, working towards a certain vision of a future. So, like, you know, I might not be as directly involved in campaigns, but I do what I can to, like, signal boost things and, like, try to stay aware of, like, what's happening in my city or around me, and to be like, all right, so this is the way, this is what we do. All right, let's get this message out. Tell me what's happening. How can I support this? But also try not to, like, pull from my own energy, because I think that it's a disservice to, like, creating, I guess, a canon of, like, Black experimental, like, pop music and stuff I think we need, because it expands the imagination of people. If you see something that you haven't seen before, it makes room for, like, you to envision other people or to, like, give other things a chance that maybe you wouldn't. And that goes for, like, promoters, labels, press, fans of music, other artists, you know, to maybe try things that they wouldn't have tried or break out of the mold. I think that we just need more of that.
Right, and so you're certainly able to lead by example in that sense, I guess, and you know, just give people those opportunities by just, like you said, just putting them on the bill with you, which is perfect. And I think the best way to go about that, as someone in your position, is to book those artists, give them more exposure, and then, you know, I guess that starts the cycle in a way, because if someone like that eventually, you know, tours long enough and becomes popular enough, then they're in your position and they can do the same thing.
I hope so. And I mean, like, so I was on this festival last year in Detroit, and it was, like, a really pretty large festival in terms of the attendance. And they had pretty large acts, and I was on the bill, that, like, amazingly. I was really happy to be a part of it. And they asked me to curate an after party for, like, an official after party for that concert or for that festival. And I was like, you know what? I'm looking at this lineup, and it's almost all white people. It's like, we're in Detroit, you know, and I know the audience might be mainly white, which is fine, but white kids listen to, like, Black artists, and, like, why aren't, like, there are so many artists that could fit this vibe of your festival who are Black women or women of color. So I'm like, let's just do all Black women on my bill. Let's just not even, like, and so, like, the whole, like, my after party was, like, all Black women. So I'm like, you know what? They might not be on the main stage, but at least we can, like, draw attention to, like, that difference and contrast and like, talk about it a little bit. So, like, those little moments are like, all right, I don't have a ton of control, but, like, I can at least make this point and also pay some Black women in Detroit to do their thing and be amazing on stage, you know, like, here's the money, you know, and we can just have a good time. So, like, those little things can help, and hopefully, and even, so then now there are Black women on the bill for the festival this year, which is super interesting. So,
is it some of the same artists that you booked?
I don't know if we had made a difference, I don't know, but it's like, I'm happy to see that.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I mean, so for that after party, I'm curious, who were some of the artists that you had play there?
Oh yeah, Bev Love is a really, really phenomenal R&B artist in Detroit. She had a project out called "Talk That Shit." She had this super like bossy, like S&M-ish song called "Do What I Say," and I was like, oh my god, this is great. Like, I just love everything about it. She's a really great singer. The production was really good on the record. She's so good on stage. She's one of those people that just needs a microphone and she will tear it down. There was an artist named Jay Prime, who's a really great producer, engineer, artist, singer, and rapper. Detroit Che, which is CHE, was another artist. And then Brittany Stoney, who is a playwright. She's a Kresge Arts Fellow in Detroit. She actually had a play produced, a musical that she'd written, and she's an R&B artist. I think she has a video out now called Brit, which is it's a really great, like, poppy R&B song. So it's like Black women who are excellent, you know, and it's not like I'm putting you on the bill because it's like you're good and you deserve to be and you're better than other people and, like, you need to be on more bills. So, yeah, I think it's like definitely we want excellent artists too. It's not just to say that we put someone on the bill because of how they identify, but it's just to say, yeah, it should be weird to you that women are on the bill because women are doing excellent stuff in Detroit, and, you know, period.
So everyone listening, go check out these artists.
Yeah,
as you're listening to this,
sure,
go like their social media, go watch the videos, go listen to the songs that he's talking about. I want to talk a little bit about your initial involvement with music and sort of how everything got started. I read somewhere that you've had little to no professional vocal training, which is incredible to me because of your falsetto, which is amazing. Is that true? That you kind of are you self-taught?
Yeah, I mean, I was in a choir. Like, I feel like a lot of people were like in choir in middle school and high school. Like, not necessarily. It wasn't like I was like competing. Because I think that, like, there's people in choir who are in choir, and there's people in choir who are like, well, I'm going to regionals. And, you know, it's like I wasn't that person. I was just like, oh, you know, and I tried to take voice lessons for, like, I just don't think my mom could afford it. So and also it just didn't work as far as, like, scheduling. So I maybe went to, like, one or two. And I always was super in awe of, like, people in my choir who were, like, because I didn't grow up singing in church, and so there were like a few artists who were like gospel trained, and I just feel like gospel training for whatever reason just makes your voice so powerful and like just such amazing control and like such a great ear for pitch if you do it enough. So I was always kind of like, oh man, I suck. Like, I wish I could be, you know, as good as this person or whatever. So I really just like. The most I did was, like, I was always mimicking artists that I would listen to and just try to do what they were doing. And my mom says, my grandmother passed away, but she was like, you know, my grandmother was very, like, well-known for, like, doing imitations of people. She's like, I think you get that from her. So I'd always be doing, like, impressions of whatever and also happen to do that of, like, music. So for whatever reason, I think that helped me develop more vocal control than the average bear. So then I was in a rock band, and I think that, you know, we gig around Flint and stuff, and super just like dumb kids, just playing 3-hour sets at some random bar for like 10 people. And then, like, eventually getting a bit of a following in Flint. And, like, you know, when you play 3-hour shows, you get a lot of vocal stamina, and I think it helps you get more control over your voice. And, you know, getting out of, like, getting more into the production side of things and, like, focusing more on that, I think gives you a bit of an understanding of how, like, vocal work in the studio, which is different than live. And so, like, really revisiting music that I love and thinking, what do they put in together in the studio? Like, paying attention to that, like, made me want to have more control over my voice. So just, like, slowly, gradually, every time I would record, like, trying to control more of that. And I feel like that has been my training, which, you know, when it comes to hours put in, it's probably similar to having vocal training. I feel like while I haven't had formal vocal training, I think the experience has taught me a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like the mileage on your voice alone, especially from a young age, is what's really going to do it. I mean, you know, for the first time sitting down in the studio, not everyone realizes that you don't run the song through a few times and just take whatever's good. Like, you will sit there and, you know, if the engineer wants you to sing that phrase 8 times in a row or 30 times in a row to get the best take, you know, that's what it takes. Sometimes it's hours and hours and hours on the same part. So yeah, I think you're right. That definitely is vocal training. And as far as listening to records and stuff when you're younger, you know, you got to be able to replicate to create. I guess you hear a lot of people say that. So yeah, that's training through experience. That's cool.
Yeah, and I do a lot of my own vocal production, and I think that because I think the hard part in Michigan is that we don't have the same music industry that we used to. And so a lot of times you go to a studio and an engineer isn't really the typical traditional idea of like a vocal engineer and producer. So a lot of times they'll just be like, you like that? Great. All right, print it. And like you wouldn't get the result you wanted.
Yeah.
Why does it sound like crap? So a lot of times it was like beating my head against the wall or like figuring out, like I didn't even know that you comped vocals. I didn't know that was a thing until like 2 years ago. Do you know what I mean? Like, because no one was like, yeah, you don't have to do the whole verse. You can like, you know, do a couple of passes and we'll patch things together. Like,
yeah.
Because I think that there's just so many things that you don't learn if you don't kind of, if you aren't in like a bigger city where there are a lot more music professionals and like you don't get exposed to that as much, unfortunately. I think Detroit's getting a lot better, but it's got a ways to go.
Were you also able to learn sort of like production techniques and like the recording process on your own, just from like watching and figuring it out? Because that's something that I've always been really interested in. I've had a lot of friends do that, but I know people who will go to school for that. Is that also something that you've kind of learned through experience and learned through, like you said, just banging your head against the wall to figure it out?
What I've learned is that I stay in my lane and like become good at a certain skill set, which is arrangement, writing, and I feel like engineering, as far as outside of vocal production, is really challenging to like pick up unless you dedicate a lot of hours to it. And I just like find good engineers that I work with. Like I've had the same engineer for the past 2 projects, and I'll produce my tracks, a lot of my tracks, just at home and bring stuff in, and we'll experiment. And it's pretty meticulous because oftentimes I'll be like, I need this synth to sound like this, and then we need it to do this, and it's like it's very much like he's very patient and like translates every idea and helps me like build it.
Yeah.
But he's been using Pro Tools since he was 12. And that's just like, and I also didn't have, I didn't have computers growing, I didn't have access to like equipment.
Yeah.
And I think that there's money involved in that, in a lot of that. So I'm like, I could become an engineer and like learn Pro Tools, but I also could like just work with this really great person and, pay him to like work on this with me. And I think we both have gotten better working together, and we work really quickly. And it's like fun. I feel like it would be hard to just be like by myself in like a basement or something, engineering my entire project on my own. So I'm all about collaboration. But I also get really picky and like, definitely want things a certain way. So he's also like, he's very, like I said, he's very patient.
Yeah.
And thankfully we can like work on things that way.
But I guess it's always good to have that other person to, not only pass the ideas through, but maybe for them to influence another idea. I guess, you find that when you've been writing something by yourself and just sort of it's been stuck in your head for weeks or whatever, and you bring it to the table and someone else can like change little aspects of it, things like that.
Yeah, and even like his reaction to stuff, like if I bring, and he's like, yeah, woo, like then I'm like, oh, cool, I feel good about it. And I think sometimes writing, even if you're doing something with another person just in the room, you are more critical of what you're doing yourself. And I feel like that has always been a great aspect. Or like when we're doing vocal takes, if he gets really excited about a take, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes me feel good, And I feel like you want to work a little harder when someone's like sitting there.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. It's good to either have that either mild pressure or mild support or whatever it is. And I also read somewhere that you feel some of your best songs were songs that were written in like an hour or like a quick session. Does that still apply here to this process with you and your engineer now?
Yeah, well, I think it just depends. Like, so there's so many things that go into writing a song. Like whether it be we have the hook. But then the producing it around it is like its own journey and saga.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the aspect, but I feel like we've had a lot of great moments. Like I was writing a song with someone who I hadn't written with before, so it was just I had been trying to do like a lot of piano, vocal like writing, just like let's just get the melody and that written. So I was working with someone for the first time, and we were like, having fun noodling around, and I was like, all right, let's play like an inspirational chord. I'm gonna just sing, and like immediately that was the part, and it was so good. And like, okay, yeah, just like stop trying so hard, and also like sometimes I'm not kidding. I'll just be like, all right, well, I'm gonna just be Sia now, or I'm gonna just be Rihanna. What would Rihanna do? Okay, that works. Like sometimes you just have to like put your head in a different space, and like I wrote this track called Hijabi. For a woman, Mona Haidar, and it came out like last month, and it's been really successful. And I think it's so simple, and writing for another artist is so much easier sometimes because you have like you just don't second guess yourself as much, and I think you're less inhibited. And so sometimes when I'm working on my own music, I'll just pretend like, okay, if I'm writing this for like Missy Elliott, like what would I write? Just like take myself out of the equation, and then something flows way more easily when you feel like you're less invested in a weird way. Like you just want to just do this for the sake of the song, and not just worried about other stuff related to like your own ego, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, because I guess that sort of breaks it down to purely the song, because you're not necessarily worrying about what it's going to be like for you to perform it, for you to sing that one part, or it's not something that's weird for you. I guess it is just purely songwriting.
Yeah, like what does a song need? And getting to that. Sometimes asking that question gets you something better.
So what's next on the horizon for you? What have you been working on? I've
just been working on music and thinking about how to release it. So we're hopefully going to be releasing something this summer.
Awesome.
And we're playing a really cool festival called Les Escaliers in the south of France. I'm just so excited about that.
Whoa.
A lot of artists from Detroit and I are going to be heading out there. Hopefully just releasing a project this summer and supporting it this fall with some tour dates when we can announce that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Well, I know we're all very much looking forward to that. I did not know about the festival in France. Congratulations. That's really cool.
Hey, I'm excited.
Well, I have one more question for you before we wrap this up, and it's generally the most difficult question. What one song do you think everyone needs to hear, and why? And so, I mean, it could be one of yours or anyone's really.
Oh, geez. So challenging. That's such a challenging question. One song everyone needs to hear and why. I think that I'm going to just say, like, Missy Elliott, Get Your Freak On.
Hell yeah.
I think that song is such a perfect example of, like, Black woman excellence, hip-hop excellence. It's, like, a shining example of what, like, someone who's really like an innovative pioneer in her field and genre can do, and I feel like you can take so much from it, and it's just a really fucking great song. So yeah, we'll go with that.
Perfect. All right, Missy Elliott, get your freak on. Good. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been really great talking to you, and I'm looking forward to your new material.
Sounds good, man. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you so much to our guest Tunde Olaniran. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode of the Changeville podcast. Until then, check out our website or Facebook page for all your Changeville news. Until next time, this is Matt signing out.
See him flossing in the metal, the game's in a higher level, dimensions we in the several. You see, we get them together. DIY French, we swanging, bangers, bangers, he slanging. Show on point, he's slaying. He wasn't always a spade. Brown boy, slanted eyes, bleach stained sweatshirt, throwing water on me in the middle school restroom. Only brown hair in my ninth grade play. 13, walking in the streets of UK. Now maybe there's a lesson I've been given, or some wisdom from the stories that I need to tell. And everybody's hoping and scraping and wishing they could be something outside themselves. If I can be me, then you can be yourself. Might not be easy. It's like we're never satisfied, right? We're never satisfied, right? Got it locked with the namesake. Won't stay the same, change like every day. Got it locked with the namesake. Won't stay the same, change like every day. Smiling through the vicious, a puzzle piece never fit in a new thread he was given to weave a singular vision. Could never be avaricious. Instead of quiet, ambitious, no reason left to resist it. I hated this competition, so I'm not quitting. They stay sweating, try to dictate a life they not living. Tea open about that truth. Feeling don't buck like a deer when shot. Get a no formula, run this path that you're on. We all gotta make our own.